The Elite Four consists of some of the strongest trainers in their respective region, ready to send you crying to your mother, but what if all regions came together to make one definitive Elite Four for the entire Pokemon world with just a single champion? Today I'll be ranking each Elite Four member to make that happen to create the perfect Elite Four. We have the Champion tier reserved for the Champion, the Elite Four tier for the 4 members we pick, a tier for strong candidates that could have made it but just missed it, then a tier for trainers that I don't think deserve to be part of this perfect Elite Four, but I can definitely see an argument for, and then a what are you doing here tier for the worst Elite Four members like Bruno. I guess we can start there since we're going to go in order of region, but yeah, Bruno is one of the easiest Elite Four members ever. While most Elite Four members specialize in a single type, many of Bruno's Pokemon are just mono fighting, which makes it easier to exploit their weaknesses, and they're all really slow. At least other Elite Four members have dual type Pokemon to help fix their weakness a little bit more, but in the case of Bruno, if you have a flying type Pokemon to handle his fighting types, then a water or grass type to hit his Onix or Onixes, as he has multiple in some games, despite being a fighting type guy, he has multiple rock types, then he really isn't an issue. Seeing as you need Surf to get to the Elite Four in Kanto anyway, and having a Pokemon with Fly is incredibly convenient, most teams are already well equipped to handle Bruno. You might have to watch out for his Machamp in Fire Red and Leaf Green that has no guard and Stone Edge, but yeah, Bruno, just stay in the what are you doing tier. I'm also just doing a regular boring online tier list that I can show the image of over here. I didn't really know how to show this on the whiteboard, and a few boring people in the comments of my previous video said that using the whiteboard was weird because they don't like having fun, I guess. I don't really know. So here, this is what we're doing for this video. At least with an online tier list though, we don't have to worry about the tape and having things fall off it. How did that even happen? Bruno's actually the second member of the Kanto Elite Four, as first is Lorelei. She's a pretty cool trainer, focusing on Ice-type Pokemon. No, I did not write that pun on purpose. And in Generation 1, she can be a menace, freezing your Pokemon. In Generation 1, you don't thaw out unless you're hit with a Fire-type move, so you better pack some full heals. As dumb as some NPC trainers are, they're not going to hit you with a Fire-type move after you're frozen. While the Ice-type isn't seen as the best type, the Kanto region, especially in Generation 1, didn't really offer too many fighting types or fighting type moves for that matter to hit their ice type super effective. Even if you did manage to have a fighting type, she also had Slowbro, which isn't even an ice type, but it's part psychic type, but only has an offensive psychic type move in the rematch in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. In Pokemon Stadium 1, she even has an Articuno on her team, which is just wild. I'm not going to focus too much on side games like Stadium and stuff like that, and just focus on the main games, as if we focus on side games, then Bruno in Puzzle League is quite a challenge, as he's technically an Elite Four member, along with like Richie and Gary for some reason from the anime. Yeah, Puzzle League doesn't make any sense. But overall, Lorelei is a solid Elite Four member. She's not the hardest, but she certainly isn't the easiest. It makes for a great introduction to the Elite Four, as she is a step up from the previous gym leaders. I wouldn't add her to my fictional perfect Elite Four, but she is a strong candidate due to her notability among Pokemon fans, and also the infamous rumor I remember as a kid, where if you go into her house on the 7,000 Fire Red Leaf Green, you can get a Celebi or something. I don't think that was a common rumor. I think it was just something that a kid that I knew made up. But yeah, I tried getting Celebi and Fire Leaf Green that way. So I always remember Lorelei as the lady who did not give me Celebi. For Agatha, it's a different story. My biggest issue with her is that she's a ghost type specialist, but has more poison types than anything, and might as well just be a poison type specialist. She at least adds Mischievous in her Fire Red and Leaf Green rematch team, and then Alolan Marowak in her Let's Go rematch, but she isn't that great. I also want to make a quick note that the Let's Go games do a great job at making the Elite Four teams better for the rematches. If there's one thing I'm going to praise Let's Go for, it's that, I guess. Agatha definitely isn't Bruno tier. You can at least make an argument for Agatha, but let's face it, she's like 90 years old. Is she really going to move to this fictional new region to join the Elite Four? Probably not. The last member of the Kanto Elite Four is Lance, arguably the most recognizable Elite Four member out there. Lance has a similar issue as Agatha, as although he is a Dragon-type specialist, there was only a single Dragon evolutionary line in Generation 1, so he also has a Gyarados and an Aerodactyl randomly. Great Pokemon that also offer fantastic type diversity, but they aren't dragons. At least there isn't a common weakness all of his Pokemon share, and his final team in Heart Gold and Soul Silver is devastating. Yes, he is champion in that game, not an Elite Four member, but more on champions later. Lance also appears in Black 2 and White 2 in the PWT, where his team is just 6 dragons packed with pseudo-legendary Pokemon. Then in the Let's Go rematch, he has an Alolan Executor and a Mega Charizard X, making him one of the most difficult and coolest Elite Four members out there. I definitely want to add Lance as the first member of my perfect Elite Four team, and as for the champion in Kanto, we'll talk more about champions later on, so stick around for that. Moving on to the Johto region, we start off with Will. He's a Psychic-type trainer who, funny enough, has 2 of the same Pokemon as Lorelei, the Ice-type Elite Four member. His team is strong, but even by Generation 2 standards, there were better Psychic types for him to have. He doesn't use Alakazam, arguably the best non-legendary Psychic from Generation 1, Espeon, or Wobbuffet, and the strongest exclusion of all in my opinion is Slowking, a new evolution in Generation 2. I don't know why they give him 2 Zapdos when having a Slowking paired with Slowbro or even an Espeon would have been a much cooler fit with the Johto region, especially since the Dark-type Elite Four member Karen uses Umbreon, although as we previously learned, Johto really doesn't like Johto Pokemon. Overall, Will isn't terrible and does have a place as an Elite Four member, but not on my Elite Four team, so we'll stick you in the you have an argument tier because honestly I wouldn't even really consider Will. Then, third up is Koga, getting a promotion from being a gym leader in Generation 1. His team is much more rounded, compared to what his team was when he was a gym leader in Red and Blue and Yellow version, as both of those games had entirely different teams for Koga, and neither of them really fit him too well. Now in Gold and Silver, he has mostly poison types, and randomly a Fortress, which is close enough I guess. He has a Crobat now too, and I feel like Crobat was made for Koga as it fits his theme really well. It's even his partner Pokemon in Pokemon Masters, although nobody plays Pokemon Masters. I also think it's kind of weird that he has a Crobat now, despite him not having a Golbat at all in Generation 1, or even in Fire Red and Leaf Green for that matter. As a gym leader in Let's Go, his teams are much more diverse as they were in the older Kanto games, and in the Heart Gold and Soul Silver rematch, he has Swalot, my favorite Pokemon, so that pretty much just seals the deal for me. There's obviously going to be a lot of personal biases in this video, since I don't really know how to do this in an unbiased way, unless you just go based off of like difficulty, but that's really no fun. And if I did it that way, it would just be like the 4th members that are even considered. Either way, while poison types weren't the best in earlier generations and didn't really get good until the introduction of fairy types much later on, Koga is one of my favorite trainers in all of Pokemon, so I am definitely adding him to my Elite Four alongside Lance. Lots of Gen 1 representation thus far. Sorry, I'm old. We're halfway done with our Elite Four through only 2 generations, but there's still a lot of Elite Four members to go over and then the champion at the end. After Koga, we have Bruno in the Gen 2 Elite Four, who we already discussed. He's really not great, and you know what, Bruno? You can get your own tier at the bottom, that's just the Bruno tier, because what are you doing here, bro? This is not Puzzle League. After that is Karen, the Dark-type specialist. Her team in Gold and Silver is a bit weird with her Vileplume and Gengar, but she at least has Umbreon, Murkrow, and Houndoom. Houndoom and Murkrow are only found in Kanto and Gold and Silver, and seeing as the Elite Four in Gold and Silver serves both Johto and Kanto, it makes a lot of sense for her team to incorporate Pokemon from Kanto. It'll never not be weird for me to refer to as Houndour and Murkrow as Pokemon from Kanto. Her rematch team in Heart Gold and Soul Silver has all Dark types, including 2 new Generation 4 evolutions in Honchkrow and Weavile, and she can be pretty tough. I think she did a solid job at introducing the Dark type in Generation 2, but I still wouldn't add her to my perfect Elite Four. She isn't that far off though, and worthy of a spot in the strong candidate tier, and maybe even in my Elite Four B team we can make at the very end. Last for Johto is Lance, who we already added to our Elite Four, so before moving on to Hoenn, I just want to remind you to leave a like on the video and support the channel as it helps a ton. I've really been trying to step up my content lately with the custom thumbnails, which aren't cheap, better camera work with the multiple camera angles, and the way I've been editing my videos. So if you want to support the channel and see more great content, especially heading into Legends EA, leave a like and subscribe as it does help the channel a ton. It is by far the best way to support any YouTuber. So now let's move on to Hoenn. I think that's your mom's favorite Pokemon region because she's always been Hoenn. I'm sorry. First up is Sydney, and he's honestly almost Bruno tier because he has 2 Pokemon, 4 times weak to Bug, as an Elite Four member. Are you even trying, Sydney? He does at least have a team of all Dark types, including a Mega Absol and Omega Green Alpha Sapphire rematch, but he's one of the easiest Elite Four members, so I'm not even really considering him. This might just be me being salty for struggling a lot against him as a kid, but all I had back then was a high-level Blaziken and 5 weak Pokemon. Granted, Blaziken matches up really well against Sydney, being a Fire and Fighting type against his Dark types and some Grass types that he has. But look, I was a child and I've played through Hoenn dozens of times since then, and now that I know how type effectiveness works, he's really easy. Second in the Hoenn Elite Four is Phoebe, and one thing I realized about the entire Elite Four in Ruby and Sapphire is that they all only use Generation 3 Pokemon. Steven had to ruin it being the champion with his lone Skarmory, which is also funny because Skarmory often gets mistaken as a Gen 3 Pokemon because of how rare it is in Gen 2 and how common it is in Gen 3, but more on Steven later. Generation 3 added 3 great Ghost-type Pokemon in Dusclops, Banette, and Sableye, all of which are on Phoebe's team. Hoenn's cool Ghost types, Houndour, and my ongoing shiny hunt for Turtwig and Platinum are just 3 of many things that I will probably never shut up about, but I am in the process of setting up my 3 DS capture cards so I can shiny hunt for Turtwig on 3 copies of Platinum at once, and no, I am not insane. So if you want to see me stream that live, follow on Twitch linked below, and I'll do like a ton of Turtwig soft resets. But back on topic. Phoebe does have 2 Dusclops and 2 Banettes for double repeating Pokemon, which I'm not a huge fan of. I really don't like it when trainers repeat Pokemon. It's more excusable in the older games where there's just less Pokemon to choose from, but she does it twice, so for that reason alone, she's going in the can make an argument here. After Phoebe is Glacia, and her team is just whack. 2 Glalie, one of the worst Pokemon ever, but can do some funny things in Generation 3 doubles and has Explosion for some reason. Then, 3 Pokemon from the same evolution line in the Walrein line. She's a little tough, I will give her that, and she does have 2 Frostlasses in Omega Green Alpha Sapphire to change her team up a little bit, but she still isn't all that great. I would put her in the what are you doing here tier if she wasn't pretty difficult, so I'd say you can at least make an argument for her, but I'm really not a big fan of her team. Her thick fat Celios and Walrein have given me trouble before, but it would have been nice to see a bit more variety. Fourth for Hoenn is Drake, and his team is just mean. He doesn't have repeating Pokemon, but dragon types are tough. I mean, he does have a Shelgon and a Salamence, which is like kind of repeating, I guess that still counts, but his team is still tough. To be honest, if Lance was just a champion and not an Elite Four member, then Drake would have an even stronger argument to be in my own personal Elite Four, and might even just make my Elite Four, but because Lance is already there and I just like him more, Drake can go in the strong candidate tier. I really want to avoid repeating types if I can, so sorry Drake, you just came a little too late. Then starting off the Sinnoh Elite Four, there's Aaron, the first and only Bug-type specialist in the Elite Four. Bug types tend to be some of the worst types, but there's some really strong bug types out there still. In Diamond and Pearl, Aaron has Heracross and a very annoying Vespiquen with Heal Order and Defend Order, as well as a Drapion. It's not a bug type, but it at least evolves from a bug type and looks like a bug, so I guess we'll count it. Then in Platinum, there replaces Beautyfly and Dustox for Yanmega and Caesar, which are huge upgrades from those early route bugs. He has one of the best possible bug type teams you could construct in Generation 4, plus a Drapion. Then in BDSP, he randomly has a Flygon on his team after you battle Heatran. Pretty random, and before looking more into this, I just thought Aaron would be at the bottom tier, but he's actually pretty solid. It's a shame he doesn't appear too much outside of the Sinnoh-based games and wasn't in the PWT or Battletree in Sun and Moon, but to be honest, I'd put Aaron towards the bottom of my strong candidate tier. They made him a very solid bug-type trainer, especially in Pokemon Platinum. For Bertha, she specializes in ground types, and much like Aaron, she has a better team in Platinum compared to Diamond and Pearl. She loses her Quagsire, which is a shame, but I like the additions of Gliscor and Rhyperior. I feel like she's pretty forgettable as an Elite Four member though, and not someone that I would even consider for my Elite Four, but I guess I can see an argument for her as she's not the worst member. Third for Sinnoh is Flint, and look, we can just ignore his team in Diamond and Pearl. He's a Fire-type specialist in a game with barely any Fire types. I don't know what they were thinking, but it's not his fault. Flint plays the biggest role out of the Sinnoh Elite Four members, being a close friend to Volkner and meeting you when you reach Sunny Shore City. His Platinum team is great and features Houndoom, which is a huge plus for me. While neither of his dual types help much with the Fire type's weaknesses, I always liked Flint and would strongly consider him to be part of my Elite Four, but I'm gonna pass on him and put him in the strong candidate tier as it was pretty difficult to pick just 4 members. Last for Sinnoh is Lucian, and while his Psychic team is better than Will's and Johto, I just can't see him being in my Elite Four. He's not bad at all and doesn't really have many negative qualities, he's just alright. I don't really have much to say about Lucian, and I don't think anybody else really has much to say about Lucian. I wouldn't consider him for my Elite Four though, so we can just stick him in the you have an argument tier, I guess. And of course, we all know Sinnoh's champion is Cynthia, and trust me, we'll talk a lot more about her later. Black and White 1 and 2 have the same Elite Four members, and the only difference between the teams are Chantel having a Drifloon over Jellicent in Black and White 2. Kind of a weird change, they could have changed a lot more as Black and White 2 expands upon the Unova Dex a lot, but whatever. Honestly, we can get through the Unova Elite Four pretty quickly since I have 3 of the 4 members in the no consideration tier. The only one I do want to discuss is Grimsley, and maybe Caitlyn a little bit too, because she does appear in the Gen 4 Battle Frontier in the Battle Castle, which is pretty awesome, but you actually don't fight her, you just fight her butler, Dirac. She kind of just exists there with him in the same sprite as him, and then just unexpectedly moves to Unova and gets a whole new team of Unovan Psychic-type Pokemon, while Dirac used Dark types, so like whatever. Grimsley, though, has a Dark-type team, and even a Houndoom in some rematches, as well as Scrafty and Bisharp, which cover Dark-type's weaknesses pretty well, especially in Generation 5. He appears in Sun and Moon and in the Battle Tree, which is a nice touch as well. I like it when Elite Four members have a bit more to them than just sitting in the Elite Four room the whole time, and that's it, which is a big reason why I picked Lance and Koga so far, as they have some sort of substance outside of the Elite Four. I would put Grimsley in the strong candidate tier, even above other Dark-type trainers in the tier like Karen. His team is just better, and he has a bit more lore, but there's 2 other Elite Four members I'd rather add over him. As for Kalos, things don't look much better for the Elite Four. All of the Elite Four members in Kalos only have 4 Pokemon, and they don't have upgraded rematch teams at all. They at least don't repeat Pokemon, but I certainly wouldn't add Malva over another 5-type trainer like Flint, I wouldn't add Drasna over Lance or even Drake, and Cybold isn't that bad, but his 2 Galosian Pokemon are 2 of the most forgettable ones, and he had the most Pokemon to pick from being a Water-type specialist, the most common type in Pokemon. As for Wickstorm, there's a bit more substance. He specializes in Steel-type Pokemon, which isn't a very common type to specialize in, and comes from a family of knights that has some lore tying into the Great War in Kalos. His team is pretty solid with Aegislash, one of the best Generation 6 Pokemon as well. I would put him in the can make an argument tier only though, since there's still quite a few trainers I would consider over him. In fact, there's at least 6 trainers I would consider adding over Wickstorm. Then after 2 regions of misses in the Elite Four, the Alola region has some interesting members. Alola is unique, as in Sun and Moon the Alola in Elite Four is new, and most of the members consist of trial captains you meet early on in the game. The exception being Kalili, or Kalili, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, who is a flying type specialist and a golfer apparently, but there's no golf courses in Alola or anywhere else in Pokemon, so I don't really know where she golfs or how she golfs or where she got her golf clubs, but she's a golfer. She's a flying type specialist and her team isn't bad or anything, I'm just confused as to why she's even here and why so little is known about her. She's a previous Island Trial champion and somehow got through the Electric and Rock Trial with just her flying types, and I can see the argument behind adding her to your own personal Elite Four, but I'm just not really doing it. Olivia, on the other hand, she has a really strong argument. When you originally face her in the Grand Trial battle, her team is okay, and she has a Lycanroc, which is awesome. Then in the Elite Four, her team is upgraded. Her Nosepass is now a Probopass, and she ditches Boulder and adds an Alolan Golem, Carbink, and randomly a Relicanth being the rare miss of her team. Relicanth does tie into her lore though, as she's into like rocks and fossils and stuff, but she changes her team up later on in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon to actually have fossils. Kind of a weird choice, I guess, but she's still pretty cool. In Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, she gets more into fossils, adding Armaldo and Cradily to her team. Overall, she is a great trainer that you get to know while playing through the game through Sun and Moon. She even has her own shop in Sun and Moon. But since we're limited to just 4 Elite Four members, I'm going to stick her towards the top of the strong candidate tier. She has a very strong argument. There's also Acerola, and she's alright I guess, specializing in Ghost-type Pokemon. Her team isn't bad, and it's rare to see a Ghost-type specialist without a Gengar, but she's one of them. I also find it odd how she doesn't use Mimikyu on any of her teams, even though her trial focuses on Mimikyu, and Mimikyu is like the premier Ghost-type introduced in Alola. She isn't bad, but not somebody I would want for my Elite Four. I can see the argument for her though. And the first Elite Four member in Sun and Moon is Hala, but in the Ultra games, it's Moyleen. That's a huge downgrade if you ask me, as although Moyleen's Steel types aren't terrible, the only new Steel type added Generation 6 that isn't a legendary or whatever you want to call Ultra Beast is Togedemaru, which isn't even on his team. There's a couple of Steel type Alolan forms like Alolan Dugtrio, which is on his team, but adding a Steel type Elite Four member when there's barely any new Steel types is still weird to me. I'm just gonna put Moline in the no consideration tier, mainly because the trainer he replaced in the Ultra games was Hala. This was a significant downgrade. Hala plays a big role early on in Sun and Moon, and his team isn't amazing boasting fighting type Pokemon, but he does have multiple Alolan fighting types. Mainly due to his role in the games as a character and what he means to Alola, I definitely want to add Hala to my perfect Elite Four team. I will say he is the 4th member though, meaning he'd be the first person I replace. You could also make the argument, just like Agatha, that he's old and might not want to move away to a new region, but Hala is one of the few things I really like about Pokemon Sun and Moon. I definitely need to replay that game pretty soon, as it's been a while, and maybe soon I'll make a video about Sun and Moon in my playthrough, but I just have a lot to work on before the release of Legends EA. I want to quickly mention Sword and Shield. If we were to consider the Galar League Champions Cup trainers as Elite Four members, then I'd replace Hala with Marnie. It's funny because I rated Dark-type trainers pretty highly, mainly because they use Houndoom, and Marnie doesn't even use Houndoom. Her reasoning is similar to Hala's though, being a rival in Sword and Shield and playing a big role in the story, while also being a very recognizable trainer. I think she would want to leave Spikemuth and do something more with her Pokemon career, but since Galar technically doesn't have Elite Four, she doesn't count, so I guess we'll just go to Paldea next. Before going to Paldea actually, I want to shout out Raihan because he uses Duraludon, and I like Duraludon. Paldea though has 2 Elite Fours, technically, with the second one being in the Blueberry Academy through the second wave of DLC, the Indigo Disc. DLC is always tricky for these type of videos since it isn't part of the main game, and like 20 years from now, you might not even be able to play DLC for Switch games unless you happen to have the DLC already downloaded on a console or have a cartridge that was bundled with the DLC. But finding those cartridges that are bundled with Pokemon DLC are actually pretty rare and kind of expensive even today. I'm just not going to count the Blueberry Academy Elite Four, but along with Kieran, they do get a shout out for being a fun part of the DLC, but they aren't really the Elite Four of a region, just a school. For the Paldean Elite Four, they actually have 5 Pokemon now, which is pretty nice, and some previous Pokemon games released not too long before it only have 4 and really dumb down the Elite Four. First is Rika, the Ground-type specialist. She has a Clodsire, which is a big plus for me, and is the one that quizzes you before entering Elite Four to decide if you're ready or not. She can even trade you a Paldean Wooper, serving as Gita's assistant, and I can see her wanting to do more and organize the brand new Elite Four. I would definitely consider adding her to my Elite Four, with the only other member from Paldea that I'd really consider being Larry. I'm going to make Rika my 3rd member of the Elite Four because I feel like she can actually organize this for us and make a proper system. Hassel then is another Dragon-type user who I wouldn't add over Drake or Lance, and Poppy is literally 9 years old, so no, you cannot come to my region. Larry is a fan favorite though, and quite strong. This is a dumb reason, in fact this whole video concept is pretty dumb, but I don't think Larry would really care to leave Paldea to join a new league. If I had to make a second team, I would add Larry alongside Aaron, Grimsley, and Olivia, but to round out my main Elite Four, it's Lance, Koga, Hala, and Rika. Another thing I like about making these videos is I learn things about Pokemon that I didn't know before, like how Aaron's actually a pretty cool trainer. We're not done though, as there's still the champion to decide. I'm not going to include former champions like Red or Mustard in the Sword and Shield DLC, and since we're excluding the Blueberry Academy, that'll also take away Kieran, although if we did count him, he would be a strong candidate tier at best. There's only one champion, of course, so I'll just say the ones that I would consider the most since there's a few lousy champions out there, like you, Wallace. As we consider Lance an Elite Four member, we won't count him either, so the champions that I would consider are Steven, Leon, and Cynthia. Steven is a fan favorite with a strong team, he has a Metagross, and considering he stepped down as champion in Emerald version for Wallace, I can see him wanting to return to be a champion of a new region, but I want my champion to specialize in various types, and Steven is only a Steel-type trainer, so he's off the list. As for Leon, he never lost a battle until you beat him in the story of Sword and Shield, and he has a pretty strong team, and is a very well-liked character in the games and among Pokemon fans. I feel like Leon is one of the most common cosplays I see at Pokemon events. I just can't see him leaving the Galar region, and honestly, I don't want my champion's ace Pokemon to be a Charizard. Leon seems like a cool and humble guy, despite what his appearance might say, and if he was salty about his loss like the rival in Red and Blue, I can see him wanting to move to a new region to be the ultimate champion, but there's one champion that I think stands above the rest. Cynthia, in my opinion, is the most difficult champion, especially in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Her team is EV trained, has good held items, and took me over 40 minutes to beat in my first playthrough. Cynthia appears in multiple games as well, with the PWT in Black and White 2 and the Battle Tree in Sun and Moon, as well as that infamous scene in Black and White where you accidentally run into her house and she battles you. She has a team of multiple types and ultimately would make for the perfect champion in my fictional region's Elite Four, and I'd bet that most people watching this video would also pick Cynthia as their champion. So for one last time, my perfect Elite Four champion would be Lance, Koga, Hala, Rika, and Champion Cynthia. I'm sure everyone has a different Perfect Elite Four list. Let me know in the comments down below which your Perfect Elite Four and Champion would be, and I'll show the full list one more time here. With all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching, and maybe we should do a Perfect Gym Leader tier list soon in a similar fashion for my Perfect Region. You want to see that? Let me know. And, bye, I guess.